Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome to the Networking RX podcast. I'm your host, Frank Agan, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections. Today, I have another great guest. Actually, today I have a return guest, a two-time return guest. But as our subscribers know, that often it's just me sharing ideas, but from time to time, I do bring on subject matter experts, authors, speakers, thought leaders, social scientists. These people share their knowledge and help us build better relationships. Today I have back on, as I indicated, for a third time, Brian Ahern. He's the Chief Influence Officer at Influence People, and he is one of only a dozen people worldwide that are certified trainers by Robert Cialdini, who is the foremost authority on persuasion and influence worldwide. And Brian just came out with a new book called The Influencer: Secrets to Success and Happiness. And he actually has come out with the other book I have is called Influence People. And People is an acronym, powerful everyday opportunities to persuade that are lasting and ethical. Brian, welcome back to the program again.
It's a pleasure to be on, Frank. And I know that listeners don't see us, but it's good to see you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So you've actually a third book. You have another book on persuasion for selling in the insurance industry as well. But this, the Influencer book is a parable book along the lines of The Go-Giver and many others who move my cheese. If you want to kind of touch on that, and then let's jump into talking about influence.
Sure. Well, my first book, Influence People, is kind of a hardcore business/psychology book that introduces the science of influence, looks at business application, case studies. And then the second book I came out with is Persuasive Selling for Relationship-Driven Insurance Agents. And that's very specific to a market. And I know that there are people who won't pick up either of those types of books. They won't pick up that hardcore business, or they won't pick up the sales book. But business parables seem to be a very growing genre. And I thought during the pandemic, had a little extra time, that I'd give my hand a shot at that. And so I wrote this parable that follows the life of a pretty ordinary guy who becomes an extraordinary influencer as he learns from mentors and coaches and clients. And I just want people to, one, enjoy the story, two, learn about influence, and three, really say, you know what, if this guy can do that, this isn't rocket science. If he can learn and apply and perfect, I can learn, apply, and perfect too.
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was kind of one of those insights that you don't stop and think about. I mean, you teach people about influence and persuasion, but what this particular podcast, it was a guest of the host. So forgive me, I don't remember all the names, but basically said whether we're always influencing people. Mm-hmm. And you have a choice as to determine what that's going to be. So you could choose, if you choose not to do anything, you're still influencing people. But whether you choose to do something intentionally or not, it's still happening.
Yes.
And I thought that was really powerful, because I think a lot of people take the mind, well, I'm not going to play the influence game. I'm sorry, you are playing the game, right? Mm-hmm. I just thought.
Well, there's a professor up in Canada, I want to say Vanessa Bohns, Bohns, who came out with a book called You Have More Influence Than You Think. And she really explores that whether or not we're trying to influence people, because we are social beings, whatever we say and do does have an impact on how other people think and behave. What I try to get people to see is you can tap into more than 7 decades of research into what are those triggers that do make it easier, so that you can be more intentional and strategic about your interactions. Because through much of the day, we're probably not trying to influence people, yet we are. But then there are things, like in business, we are trying to influence customers, potential customers, the people that we work with in the office, vendors, all types of people. We're trying to get them to do things. And I want people to understand that you can make that happen much more effectively if you understand the research about how people think and behave.
Yeah, let's jump into that if you would. Certainly along the lines of building networks and building relationships. What's new out there, and maybe nothing's new. I mean, maybe it's all been there. We're just discovering really what it is.
Yeah, I think the human brain, according to all the literature I've read, hasn't changed in some 40,000 years. So when people ask me questions about, well, we're in a pandemic and now we're using Zoom, does that stuff still work? Yes, it does. The medium that we communicate with has changed. But, if we think back to when the internet first came out and people would have said, hey, does that stuff work with email? Or if we back up further, does that stuff work if you're on the telephone? It does, because the human brain hasn't changed. We just need to align ourselves with whatever technology we have and say, how can I use that technology to tap into this psychology to make it easier for people to say yes to us? So I will say nothing really new there, but I think the more people learn about influence, they start to go like, oh, that makes sense. I've not thought of it that way. And I think one example of that comes from the book, there's the hero of the book, so to speak, is John Andrews. And John gets a job in a medical supply field. And during his training, he's traveling with some seasoned sales reps. And one of them is named Ben. Now, Ben is modeled after somebody that I worked with for a long time. In fact, every character is modeled after people that I learned things from. But as they're traveling, John notices that Ben's clients really like him. So he inquires about that. He says, I can't help but notice your clients really like you. What do you do to get people to like you? And Ben replies, I don't do anything to get people to like me. Of course, John presses a little bit and he's like, well, you must do something because it's apparent that they really like you. And he said, nope, never done anything to try to get someone to like me. So finally, through this little interaction, John gets frustrated. He said, okay, I give up then. What's the secret? And then Ben says, the secret's this: do everything you can to like the people you're with. And that's what opens people up because, Frank, when you see that I truly do like you, that I care for you, that's what opens you up to potentially say yes, because you're thinking, well, Brian likes me and he probably has my best interest at heart because that's how you operate with people. Yeah. And that subtle shift from trying to get people to like you to doing everything you can to come to like people, that's the difference maker as far as starting to form relationships. And that's one small story within the larger story that I want people to learn from.
No, I think that's a powerful lesson. When I have talked to people, I've never really said it in that sense. I'll go the opposite and tell somebody, what if I came up to you and said, I don't trust you. I don't trust you. What's your natural reaction? You're not going to be like, oh, I don't care. No, you're like, well, I don't trust you either. Right. I mean, it's just we're mimicking beings. We smile, they smile, we smile, or vice versa. And so the whole notion of just trying to get people to like us by first liking them. In fact, I remember the first time we met, we were introduced by John Millen, if I do remember. Shout out to John. And meeting with you, and one of the first lessons you gave me was, Frank, I really spent time trying to find ways to like you, was what you told me. And it was very subtle. It was just a conversation, just, hey, tell me about yourself and being interested. And I remember, before even knowing you had done anything, and when I say done anything, I don't mean manipulative, but just, hey, that's just who I am. I kind of had a feeling I liked you as well. Very interesting. Interesting.
But that also taps into what we call reciprocity, that people tend to give back the form of behavior that they first received. And that's why I said, if you smile at somebody, they almost reflexively smile back. If you frown and scowl at them, a lot of times they'll frown and scowl. So we start to realize that what we're putting out is quite often what we're getting back. And so if we make this choice to do what we can to like people, people will probably respond in kind. But the other thing that's really good is it informs then my giving at that point, because then whatever I do for you really comes from a good place because I genuinely want to help my friends, the people that I know, like, and trust. And the more I focus on getting to know you, like you, and trust you, the more effort I will put into, for example, in a business relationship, doing what I can to make sure you're getting the best service, best product possible.
Just out of curiosity, the whole notion of the influencer, what inspired you to write it? Just that people wouldn't read the more heady influence people type book, the more academic type book? Was that it, or did you have a story in mind? Or
no, I literally I recognize that some people won't pick up certain types of information, and yet I really feel like it's important that they understand what I'm teaching, because I really do believe the foundation of professional success and personal happiness, a lot of it rests on our ability to get those that we interact with to say yes to us. I mean, in business, that's real apparent, right? You're a salesperson, you want them to say yes to your proposal. You're a leader, you want them to say yes to your initiatives. But also when we go home, if our spouse and kids and neighbors more willingly say yes to us, there's probably less friction and more happiness. So that being my driving force, I thought I want to put another resource out there that I think will reach to a whole segment of people who might not be reachable by the first two books that I put out. As far as the story, I literally made it up as I went.
okay.
I didn't have a start and an end, and then let me fill this in. And one day I sat down at Starbucks and I thought, this guy doesn't have a lot of adversity in his life. There's going to be something that happens with his family. And I'm not going to say what that is. I'd like people to buy the book and read it. But I literally just in the moment crafted a chapter around there's something that goes on in his family that all of a sudden requires him. So it was a little bit more like that. I just tried to be creative in the moment. And again, I did think a lot about people that I learned things from. And I thought, how can I weave that into this story? And then as I wrote it, I hit a point, and I just remember, and again, I was at Starbucks, and I wrote this sentence, and I'm like, that's it, I'm done. I just knew that I had finished it at that point. And it wasn't intentional. I wasn't thinking I got to finish this today, but I just knew that was the proper ending for this book.
Okay, great. Yeah, the book, I'm talking to Brian Ahern. The book is The Influencer: Secrets to Success and Happiness. And again, I want people to buy the book too. But you shared that one of the lessons in there, invest time in finding ways to like other people, and that will come back to you. What's one or two other things you might be able to share with us?
Well, one of the characters that John meets, his name is Bud. He happens to be a neighbor, and he's modeled after a real friend of mine whose nickname is Pud, P-U-D.
Okay.
One of the things that I noticed about my friend, many years ago, we were in San Diego. We went to my friend's daughter was getting married, and Jane and I flew out for the wedding. And there's a golf course out there, Torrey Pines, which the US Open's been played on. And my wife's a really passionate golfer. And she's like, oh, I want to get on and I want to play the course. So my friend had a car and he said, what time do you need to be there? And she's like, we got to get there like 6:30 if I want to get on the list. And he's like, I'll be down here at 6 a.m. And he was. And when she got on the list and got her tee time at like 7:15 in the morning, he was so happy. I remember him walking around and I just thought, man, he is happier for her, I think, than she is. And she's the one who's going to play.
Right.
And it really made me notice that he does derive so much joy out of his friend's happiness, and it comes from his giving. So in the book, there's a character modeled after that where John, the lead, really starts to notice this, that Bud in the book gets joy from being that guy in the neighborhood who helps people. And what he gleans out of that in terms of a lesson is Bud tells him that he has learned there's never a shortage of people that you can help. And so my happiness can be unlimited by just choosing to be that person to help and to give. And then again, that's something that John takes and internalizes and begins to use in his professional and personal life and reaps rewards because of it.
Can you help us unwrap the science of that? When we're doing things for other people, how does that serve to influence them?
Well, first, if we back up, there was a book that I read a number of years ago that went into some of the brain science of this. And it basically said that there are two centers in our brain that light up when we're doing an activity. And they're different if we're doing it for altruistic reasons or if we're doing it for reward. And what was interesting is it said that never do those two parts of our brain engage simultaneously. In other words, we're either doing something altruistically or we're doing something for reward. And it's not that doing something for reward is bad, but I think that when we're doing things altruistically, we do feel differently about that because it's about the giving and the joy of giving. But what we find is, according to the science, that when we do things for people, we are wired to want to do something in return. That's called reciprocity. And I think over the course of human existence, for example, Frank, if it was 3,000 years ago and you and I live relatively close to each other, we have a better chance of surviving and thriving if I help you. And then you start to realize, well, I should probably do something for Brian, and we're both better off. And we begin to form this reciprocal relationship.
Yep.
And we still, to a great degree, people respond in kind to what other people have done for them. So I always encourage people, be a giver, and you multiply your resources to be able to accomplish things, because when you do need help, you can survey the people that you've helped and they want to do something for you if they have the time and capacity to do so.
To me, it's fascinating. I like how you weaved in history, ancient history, 3,000 years, and pre-civilization, because that's a hard thing to try and teach people. In the networking world, it's like give first, get second.
Mm-hmm.
That's very counterintuitive. Yeah. Well, I'm here to get something for myself. I'm at this event to grow my business. Why would I want to help somebody else? And then to get them to understand, when you put it in those terms, it really it makes sense, that it's just intuitively, okay, now I see how that fits together.
John puts it this way in the book: don't give to get, but if you don't give, you'll never get. Right? So it's not the motivation, but you also recognize that if you don't do it, you're probably not going to receive. And it can be counterintuitive, but for those who are listening to the podcast, if you're a golfer, it seems counterintuitive that if you swing easier, you hit the ball further, right? We want to think that tense up and put all your muscle into it. And that usually causes us to not hit the ball well. So step back and think about giving in the same way, that if we are more relaxed and we're doing it out of a good connection with that other person and truly wanting to help, it's almost like swinging the golf club easy and good things tend to happen.
Yeah. Now, say that again. Give to get.
We don't give to get. But if we don't give, we'll never get.
We don't give.
Here's an interesting example too.
Sure.
Many years ago, there was a meme on social media, and it had the rapper Eminem. Mm-hmm. And it said something like this: I don't care if you're black, white, gay, straight, male, female. If you treat me with respect, I will treat you with respect. And everybody was applauding that. And that is certainly better than not treating people with respect. But I went counter and I jumped in and I said, wouldn't it be better if he had said, I don't care if you're black or white, male, female, gay, straight, I will treat you with respect, and I hope you'll treat me with respect in return. In other words, give what you want, and most of the time people will give that in return. Don't wait for people to treat you with respect and then offer it. Be the one who actually does it.
That's really insightful. I mean, you're right, because I have no control over how people treat me.
Yep.
Right. I have 100% of control over what I do. And so in that situation, I can put forth the respect. I can give. I can't control what people do in return.
Right. But we tend to, but again, when we understand how people typically think and behave, and then we start acting accordingly, and we see that the returns come back, that only serves as motivation to continue that behavior. As human beings, we're pretty good learners. And so we will repeat behaviors typically that tend to work out well for us, and we try to shed the ones that don't. So once people start doing this, it becomes very natural to want to keep doing it, because you've helped somebody, you've gotten something in return, so you want to help somebody else. They help you in return, and all of a sudden you've got what I'll call a virtuous cycle where everybody is winning.
Yeah. It reminds me of something I read in Nicholas Christakis's book. They had a game set up where one of the people it was a role-playing game where you won money. And one of the players was in on the study and started just giving money to other people. I really like how you played. And that infected everybody with kind of that giving mindset. They were rewarding one another. Okay, great. We've talked about invest in liking in other people, giving to other people. One more, and if you could.
Well, there's a heavy emphasis in the book on coaching. So one of the interactions that John has for an extended period is his coach, Dwayne Edwards. And I learned a lot from somebody named Dwayne Dabrowski when it came to coaching. And it really helped John start to see the difference between a mentor and a coach. There is a difference. It helped him see the difference between, a lot of times people talk about going on a sales call, and as a medical sales rep, he was going on a sales call. But I always have learned and share this in the book that when you go on a sales call has to be, one of three things has to happen for it really to be a sales call. It's either that you leave with business in hand, you made that sale, or you know next steps. There's an agreement that something's going to happen in the future. And if you're being stalled, then you understand what has to happen to open the flow. So, the world I came out of was insurance. Insurance agent might have said, your rates are just much too high until you get them more in line. I can't do business with you. And that's where we might have said, well, Mr. or Mrs. Agent, so if we can get those rates down by 10%, that means we're going to start seeing a flow of business. And when they commit to that, now we've had a sales call. So John starts learning some nuances like that I think will really be helpful for people who might be in some sort of sales role in their profession to really start thinking about, well, just because I walked in the door at some place, that doesn't mean it was a sales call. We might have had a relationship building. We might have had some kind of call to recognize a milestone or something. Those aren't sales calls. They're important, but they're not sales calls.
Gotcha. Let's shift gears here as we work towards the end. Let's talk. You're an author. We get that, but you're more than an author. You work with companies. You work with individuals on these things. Just take some time and share with people the types of things you're working on, how they might be able to help you, certainly how they can get a hold of you.
Okay. Well, I came out of the insurance industry, started in the insurance industry in college, spent more than 30 years there. My primary target market is insurance because I just thoroughly understand it. I understand how independent agents work and sell. I understand the company side, claims, and all of that. So I spend the vast amount of my time marketing myself towards insurance entities. But I do work outside of insurance, but a lot of times that finds me. Somebody might have heard me on a podcast. They might have come across my LinkedIn profile, and then we'll sit down and we'll have a conversation. The primary markets that I work with, salespeople, they get this. They try something, they make money, they keep doing it.
Yeah.
But leaders need to be able to influence others within an insurance company. Claims reps need to be able to persuade people that they're working with so they can settle their claim. So everybody needs this, but those are some of the primary markets. And what I do, Frank, is I speak, I coach, I train, and I consult. Those are the four main things that I do, and I stay in my lane. If somebody comes to me and says, well, Brian, will you help us develop a sales process? I would say no, but I know people who can help you. But once you have your process, I can help you optimize it by making sure you're using the right psychology at every step throughout that process. So that's really what I do. And people can find me on LinkedIn, happy to connect with anybody. And then my website, which is influencepeople.biz.
And I will get that I'll get your website in the show notes. Brian, I really appreciate you for a third time. I'm sure there'll be a fourth. It's always insightful to have you on. Thanks for your time.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. And I want to give a shout out to you because when we were talking about when we first met, you were instrumental in me getting these books written, because I remember, I think it was the second time we got together, you brought a bin of books that you had written and you had gone the self-publishing route, and you kind of demystified that for me, because up until that point, I knew what I wanted to do, but it was just like out there and I wasn't sure about self-publish and all of that other stuff. But what you shared with me aligned so closely with the book coach that I worked with that I knew I was on the right track. So thank you for helping me to get these books into reality.
Well, you're quite welcome. It's always funny how we all we all know a lot, but there's so much we don't know, right? Just little things that kind of get us over the hump. So, all right, have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.